Sounds good.
My patrons.
What's up?
Indiana
Late night.
Jones. It is late night, yeah. Late night and like 5 days after we normally record.
Yeah, it's been bonkers over here, folks.
Are you doing cheerleading? Is that what the next one you were doing?
Um, I that is the yes, that is the next one I've got.
Okay. I well, the other one, no, the other one I had on my list that I think I had for you was
Hold on, I got it
voter
on my
suppression.
notes. That is also on my notes, and then also I had an idea about doing brain geography.
Okay.
Like, like I think it'd be really fun to like just kind of like travel, travel around the brain and talk about the different things they all do supposedly. Because I don't know that we've ever like explicitly done that. We've talked about it briefly in like every episode, but just being
Yeah.
like, this is what this is, and this is what we know about it. Like that'd be might be a fun mini series.
Okay.
So I don't know. It just came to me. I was like, I would love to you know, what I mean, maybe like it's not globetrot, but it's globetrot for the brain.
Dome trot.
Dome trot. I like
Um,
that a lot.
there um I don't remember where I got this, was a podcast or YouTube video or what, but I'm adding a mini on here that was the hypothesis that there were sections of your tongue that had specific tastes on it. Um,
Oh yeah.
I saw it, I sort of got a deep dive on this from something, and it was there was a reason to believe that this was accurate, but it was like based off like a misunderstanding of what some like E.G. Boring had written or something. And so
Uh-huh.
they're just sort of like, oh, let's just make that a thing. It's been thoroughly debunked, but I think it'd be sufficient to cover that in a mini.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Cool. Um, all right. Well, so I did not add much to the Electoral College stuff. I think we're fine to just cover what we have, but we'll be wrapping it up. Obviously, I have the arguments for, arguments against this whole the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact um thing, and then that's kind of the gist
Yeah.
of it. But
Okay. I like it.
I had so many conversations with people over this last week. I sort of meant to write down some of the things I walked away from those conversations with, but I forgot. So whatever.
Did you walk away with the idea that nobody understood what the Electoral College actually does and what it functions to do?
I think most people that was the case. Oh, there was something I wanted to look up though that someone asked me. It was a really good question. Is who can become an elector for the Electoral College? And I was like, I
Oh,
think
like what are the
honestly,
qualifications?
yeah, like, do you have to apply? Is this an appointed position?
Oh man, I would apply and I would disrupt that shit so hard.
How are electoral college electors chosen? Yes, this is what I want.
I'd go to
They
turn the
can't
vote
be
in
a member
Florida
of
and
Congress or hold federal office. They're
okay,
left
so
up
they
to
have to be
they're left up to
private
individual states to
citizens.
figure out.
So
It can't be.
they can't hold a public office, they have to be a private citizen? That's fucking insane.
This is another good one. I like this part too. It can't be anyone who has, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or given aid or comfort to its enemies.
Okay. Okay. Good.
um,
Good. That's a good low bar to
yeah,
reach.
It was so until the mid 1800s, it was common for many state legislatures to simply appoint electors while other citizens let their citizens decide on electors. Um, Most common method of choosing electors is by state party convention. Each political party's state convention nominates a slate of electors and a vote is held at the convention. Interesting. So each party has their own electors. How does that work? So like you only get to
Hmm,
go cast your vote if you are a member of the party and your state voted for that candidate.
that's weird.
In a smaller number of states, electors are chosen by a vote of the state's party's central committee. Either way, political parties usually choose people whom they want to reward for their service to and support of the party. Electors can be elected officials or party leaders in the state. So they just can't have a federal appointment, I guess was what the previous thing must have specified.
Okay, so they could be a state appointed, but like not federal.
Yeah. Um, where does that? It was can't be a can't be a member of Congress or hold federal office. But it sounds like a lot of them are or did serve as state officials. I'm gonna keep this page up because I'm gonna need this. Can't have engaged in insurrection. Now that rules out Republicans. I guess they can't be electors
Well,
anymore.
yeah, yeah. All the peaceful protesters on January 6th, you know?
That's right. Uh, we cover a lot of serious topics, and many of them make me very angry. But like, I can't help but laugh at them so much of the time. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's part of bringing a certain amount of levity. It's part of coping with the horror and tragedy that is our stupid world. Um,
we do so much coping here.
we do. We're coping addicts. 382. That is a lot of episodes.
I can't believe we're almost at 400.
I know. All right. We're already recording for Patreon. I should check my levels. Checking the levels.
Good evening, my levels. Hello, my levels.
That all looks really solidly good. Okay. Are you feeling ready?
I am adjusting my levels and we should be good. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I think of who I am today. All right. And ready for me to count in?
Let's do it.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your squeaking by within the margin of error host, Abraham.
And I am your swing host, Shane.
We are a psychology podcast. We talk about all of the things that people do and feel and behave and what animals do sometimes, and maybe plants here and there. And sometimes we talk about the systems that people have put into place that are just, they're bad. They're bad at being systems.
Yeah, and also they name them bad because this is not a college.
No, correct. Yeah. This is the second part in a two-part arc we are doing, talking about something that humans do called the Electoral College, Part 2, Electoral Boogaloo.
That makes you
Thanks.
laugh too. I I wrote that and it still makes me laugh like
Yeah,
that.
all credit to Shane for that awesome joke that's been making me chuckle for like over a week. Anyway, so if you're joining us for the first time here, you may want to go back and check out that first episode. In it, let's do a quick recap of what we talked about. We mostly went over the history of the Electoral College, as well as going over some specific examples, and there's only been a handful, in which the candidate who won the popular vote or lost the popular vote, I mean, still became the president of the United States.
Yes, and so basically to sum all that up, there are a lot of kind of interlocking strange systems and voting processes that could mean that somebody that most people don't like, or at least a good majority of people don't like. I mean, we could even say 3 million people don't like, could still be the president of the United States.
Or yeah, exactly. That did happen, and it is happening with increasing frequency right now. Or at least it seems to
Hmm.
have been going that way. And so it was worth digging into what the system is and why it's allowing something like that to happen. And And I think that was mostly sort of unpacking history last time. And so this discussion is going to instead be talking about the arguments that people make for and against the continuation of the system and what, if anything, we can do about it. Real quick, Shane, I just noticed it sounds like your audio is maybe not coming from your actual microphone, like maybe it's coming from your computer. I don't, and if you want to
Uh,
maybe check your Audacity and Zoom, make sure you're on or whatever
there you
on the
go. How's that?
there. That is much more like your microphone.
It
Yes.
was Zoom. It was Zoom.
Okay.
Sorry.
Great. Cool. I assume then you check that your correct microphone is on the Audacity.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah,
Great.
that one's good. Yep. Mhm.
Cool. Thank you. All right. I'll get back to it. Beep. So first, it is August 28th, which means Happy National Cherry Turnover Day. If you're into pastries
Love
and
that.
snacks.
Love pastries. That's my problem. That's why my nutritionist is so mad at me right now. Um, it's also National Bow Tie Day, which I cannot wear because ties make me gag.
I learned how to tie a bow tie. It's actually not terribly difficult.
I'm not surprised that you would have that skill. I mean, I love that. I love that you do, but I am not surprised that you have that skill.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
It
it
is
absolutely is.
okay, great. It is International Read Comics in Public Day and
Yeah,
private too if you want to, I guess.
yeah, don't be ashamed. It's Dream Day.
Ooh,
Ooh.
interesting. It is Crackers Over the Keyboard Day. Mostly what they're recommending here is turn your computer upside down or your keyboard upside down and shake the crumbs out of it or get the compressed air can and spray the crumbs out of it or just don't eat food on your keyboard.
Yeah, good idea. I like that. It is National Power Rangers Day. So go
Sweet.
Power Rangers, which has
Nice.
the most 90s theme song I've ever heard.
It really, yes, it is icon archetype of 90s theme songs.
Yeah.
It is Race Your Mouse Around the Icons Day. And by mouse, we mean computer mouse, like a trackpad or something. And I guess just zip around your screen for some reason.
Yeah. Sure. It's Radio Commercials Day, which, I'm fine with them until it's the ones with the police sirens in the background, and then I get really worried.
That is a terrible idea for a radio commercial. Oh, man.
So mean.
Oh, geez. All right. It is Red Wine Day, unless you're a white wine drinker, and then it's no wine day.
Yeah, I mean it's fine, I guess, if you like old grapes too. It's Tug of War Day.
Oh, all right. Willing to Lend a Hand Wednesday. Oh, that's lovely. Very nice.
Oh, I like that. It's National Composites Day if you like composite materials.
Composites week, actually.
I'm sorry,
Eh,
it's week. It's the whole week.
the whole week. Yeah, this is celebrating and bringing awareness to the fact that we build stuff, I guess.
Sure.
It is Be Kind to Humankind Week. And I mean, I feel like if anything is a theme of our values on this show, that is it.
That is the one thing. That's what Kurt Vonnegut says. If I know one thing, if I know one rule, then God damn it, you've got to be kind. Um, it is Break Safety Week.
Like taking breaks from work.
Well, that too, maybe. I mean, if you want to, but I think mostly just making sure your car works or your bike works or your
Yeah.
unicycle. Well, unicycles don't have brakes usually.
Whatever vehicle that moves and needs to come
Whatever.
to a stop somehow.
Yeah, yeah. Whatever you need to use to stop your wheels.
Sure. It is Health Unit Coordinators Week. That sounds very important.
That does sound very important. It's National Safe at Home Week, which everybody should feel safe at home.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that one.
Yeah.
It is World Water Week. We all get water this week. Congratulations.
Yay. Thirst quenched.
Thirst quenched. Okay, now, as I mentioned, although we do like to celebrate these holidays, or at least acknowledge them briefly at the top of our discussions, we are actually here to talk about the Electoral College. If you have already been with us, we're happy you are continuing on. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We're happy to have you. If you like what you hear today, and you would like to support us, you can head over to our Patreon. There you'll get access to some bonus content. You can always leave us a rating and review, like and subscribe, pick up some merch, or go tell a friend, or destroy the Electoral College and say that we inspired you to do it. And we would be very proud of that legacy. But let's
Yes.
instead start with the arguments that people make for keeping the system as it currently exists in the Electoral College. And I guess I guess before we even jump into that, let's do, because I sort of did a brief recap over what we discussed in the last episode. But in case people are joining us for the first time and do not feel inclined to go check out that last one, or just in case you need a quick refresher, let's just give a really brief description of what the Electoral College is.
Yes. So, the Electoral College, let me go back to our notes because I forgot what it was. It's essentially the Electoral College is not a place, and it is certainly not a college in the university sense. Basically, what it's a group of people that elect the president of the United States based on a lot of strange rules in every state. And ultimately, what it is like every state has a certain amount of electoral votes. They have points, if we count them as points, if you want to say that. But every state, depending on their population and depending on how many representatives and how many congressmen or congress folk, I should say, they get points that are used to elect the next president in every presidential election.
Yeah, yeah. So when we cast votes as citizens, what happens is that we have a winner takes all system for the state in which we live. And so whoever gets the most votes in that state will get that state's entire slate of electors to vote for that candidate. No matter how close the margin was, whoever got the most, it could be by one single vote, is the that person gets the entire slate of electors. As you said, they get one for every Congress person that they have, which means two for the senators, and then however many for Congress people. This means that the smallest number of electors a state can have is three. And it also means that this really heavily gives much more voting power to states with small populations, because states with large populations, although they do have more House of Representative members, they do not have more senators. And states with small populations have a minimum of three electoral votes, even if they have proportionally much smaller populations than some of their larger population states nearby.
Right.
What tends to be the case then is that, uh, well, in most of history, what has happened is whenever a candidate wins a state, they get all of that state's electors, and most of the time, the most of the votes go towards that candidate. That candidate gets most electors, they become the president. But in about five instances throughout history, there have been times when the candidate lost the popular vote, but happened to get enough votes from the electoral system that they became the president anyway, mostly because they were able to squeak by with the majority of votes in many more small states, even though they didn't get the majority of votes in some of the larger states. And that wasn't the case for all of them, actually. Some of them, there were different reasons that the person who won the popular vote did not get elected, but that's mostly, or that is how it is mostly shaken out in the instances where the person who didn't win the popular vote became the president.
Right.
So anyway, I think that more or less rounds out the discussion of just understanding how the electoral system works. So it's really not a
Yeah.
place; it's a process, and as I said, it tends to favor low population states. And so let's get into the arguments for why people think that we should keep this system in place.
Yeah. So, one of the most consistent arguments made in favor of the Electoral College is that the decision to choose the president would rest in the hands of only the biggest cities and biggest states, making the voice of the less populated areas weaker when choosing the leader. So, the concern is that more densely populated areas have more power than places that are less densely populated.
Because there's more people there. Exactly right.
Right.
Now, we, I don't know if you're hearing the rebuttal that we're going to be forming in your mind already, but essentially we're not gonna make our rebuttals now. We're gonna go through all of the arguments, and then we're gonna go through the counter arguments, and the counter arguments will make many of our rebuttals. So we'll
Yes.
just let them say what they're gonna say. So that's one of the arguments. It would put all this power in the hands of more populated areas. As heritage.org put it, quote, Beep, as heritage.org put it, it, quote, would reshape our political landscape by concentrating power in our largest states and cities. The tribalism and mob rule of which the founders warned would be realized, and the voices of smaller states would become marginalized, end quote. And that's their opinion that they have posted on their website as their position on this.
Yes. One source went so far as to point out that the Senate helps ensure that all states are represented equally by giving each state two senators, and the Electoral College works exactly as intended. It makes it so that just having the raw votes to win doesn't matter as much as having a geological balance. Geological balance.
Yeah, that's definitely one key part of that sentence. The other that stands out to me is not just having the raw votes.
Yes.
We don't want that. We don't want to just
We just,
have the votes.
uh-huh. We just want to make sure that the bullet points are highlighted and bolded for you as we
That's
talk
right.
about their arguments.
Imagine underline, highlighted, bold, italics. We want to
Yes.
make sure
Yes.
they don't win by just raw votes, they say. Okay.
They want geological, they want land balance.
Land balance. The okay. All right. Um I want to continue, but let's go on to our next point here.
Sure. Yes.
Another argument, another similar argument is that in the electoral system or without the electoral system, presidential candidates would only campaign in the most populated areas and address issues relevant to those larger areas, and would be less likely to campaign for and address issues in less populated areas. And that in this case, presidential candidates would then just ignore states such as Maine and Vermont, because they are not that populous states. They don't have as large of a population as other states. That is an argument that is also made.
Okay. Another argument, surprisingly, is that the Electoral College helps preserve the two-party system, which helps prevent a large number of candidates from different parties being on the ballot. So if you're ever worried about the two-party system, that's one of the arguments that's being made for the Electoral College.
Yes, I think it's fun. Again, I'm trying to avoid getting directly into counter arguments,
I'm
but I
trying
think you
so
could,
hard.
yeah, you hear the argument for keeping it is to help preserve the two-party system. And I'm like, an argument for getting rid of it is because it helps preserve the two-party system. I think
Right.
we'll get there. We'll get
Yeah, we'll
there.
get there. We
Strength.
will land that plane. Don't worry.
That's right. Finding strength within. All right. Moving on. One source
Mhm.
suggested that without the Electoral College, a candidate could win the votes of only a few of the states with the largest population, winning not a single vote in all of the other remaining states, and still win the election, is essentially the arguments that they're making because of the
Yeah,
states with big populations.
right. Some have pointed out that we just have other bigger problems to worry about. The electoral system is written into our Constitution. This means that to change it, it would require a two-third majority in both the Chamber of Congress as well as ratification from three-fourths of state legislators. The fact that this has been proposed over 700 times without success shows how difficult it will be to pass.
That is a critical point, and we actually did mention in the first episode the reason part of the issue here when they wrote the electoral college and they sort of didn't really hammer out the details because there are some nuanced things that have come up in this system is we sort of made the joke that they were like, good enough, I guess we'll figure out what happens. But the way that they wrote it, because they made it part of the Constitution, is that to change it is nearly impossible. Not impossible,
Yeah,
but nearly impossible. Like
it's
it's
very, very hard.
like, how often do we get a two-thirds majority on anything in both chambers of Congress and then get that ratified by three-quarters of the states? Um,
Yeah.
in the time that we're in, there is just not that much agreement on any one issue, I think.
No, almost never. Almost
Yeah.
never.
Okay, we only have two more arguments to cover in favor of this. Another for the Electoral College is that other democracies around the world use electoral systems. So it's not like using electoral college is totally without precedent because you can find this in other democracies around the world.
Yeah, so the argument that they do it, so we can do it too. If my
Sure.
friends jump off a bridge, I would go.
Yeah.
And the last argument is there is, of course, the quote, this is the way we've always done it argument. If you can call out an argument. And that's actually an argument that people make. We've always done it like this. The country was
Yeah.
founded on this, so why would we ever change it?
That was actually kind of one of the points that heritage.org made. They're like, this is the system we have in place. We've had it for a long time. I'm like,
Right.
we had slavery for a long time. That wasn't a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah. We were able to get rid of that.
All right. Well, we had mentioned before that it is Radio Commercials Day, and we're kind of radio, so here's some commercials.
Haha. Real quick, let me double check. It sounds like my son just walked in, so I want to make
Okay,
sure he's home. So
cool.
I'll be right back.
Hopefully not a burglar.
If it is, see you later. What? Can you just make sure he's inside? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, not a burglar. So all is well.
I took this moment to eat some almonds.
Oh, good for you. Almonds are wonderful.
You were so fast. I thought you'd be wrestling that intruder for a while. So, okay.
It was close. I was worried.
Okay. Beep. All right, let's get back to our discussion here about the arguments for and against the Electoral College. And now we have concluded the part where we try and, with a straight face, make arguments for the Electoral College and can now instead turn to the, I guess you call them rebuttals, arguments for eliminating the Electoral College or against having that system at all. Maybe just common sense is another way we could describe
Sure.
these statements that we're about to make. But let's go ahead and dive right in.
Yeah, yeah. I call the section "We get to be ourselves now." So let's take these arguments in reverse order. We're going to talk about the rebuttals, kind of going backwards from what we just described, right? So going to the "this is the way we've always done it" argument. That was also used way back before the germ theory of disease was kind of, came about, and
Yeah.
that was used to prevent, and before that was used to prevent policies that would require doctors to wash their hands between surgeries, and resulted in massive numbers of preventable, unnecessary death. So this argument is so bad. It's the anti-science argument, right? It's the anti-data argument. We've always done it like this. Why would we ever change it? Well, we have data to say that it doesn't work. And so
Right.
we're going to do something better and different. So the argument is so bad, it should almost be used as the argument for doing something. Because if someone says this, they are wrong in principle, even if the rest of their arguments are sound. If your argument is always, this is how we've always done it, then you are already missing the point of anything, of doing anything.
You're on the wrong side of that argument.
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah. Stop it. Just don't include that and you'll be in a better position. Okay,
Right.
great. So that's just a bad argument. Logically, conceptually, theoretically, practically, it sucks. All right, next argument here. No other country uses the argument that we're now addressing is the one that other democracies use an electoral system. There are other countries that do use sort of electoral systems. However, no other country, none, not one, uses the electoral system the way that the United States uses the electoral system. Most
Sure.
of the other countries that do have electoral college systems, they actually use them to elect senators or some other kind of legislators, members of parliament could be one. If we look at Myanmar, Burundi, Estonia, India, Madagascar, Pakistan, Nepal, Trinidad, and Tobago, Vanuatu, and Vatican City, these are all places that do use a sort of electoral system in which electors choose the head of state, but those electors are not always even representing the actual votes of real people.
Right.
Oftentimes, they were just elected to their position without any, whatever position that might be, without any idea or concept that then they would be choosing a specific candidate on the behalf of the people who elected them. They just get to pick, choose, and appoint that person to that position. So
Right.
that a very different system. Nobody uses an electoral college the way that we do to choose their head of state. So just because other democracies or versions of government that kind of look like democracies use an electoral system, none of them do it the way the United States does it, and certainly no like developed countries with democracies do it the way that we do it.
We're number one. We're number one. Um, Further, in places where the head of state is chosen by an electoral system, the head of state is largely a symbolic position with very little power. The actual power rests with the prime minister, who is never directly elected by the voters, or at least we couldn't find any examples of this. But no democracy, no country at all uses an electoral system to choose the head of state in the same way that the US does it. More than half of the countries that elect a president do not use an electoral college at all. In 33 of 41 countries that directly elect the head of state without a prime minister, the head of state is elected by the popular vote. In 22 of those 33, the winner must have an absolute majority of the popular vote.
And so, for that reason, they'll often actually go several rounds of voting that'll sort of weed out candidates. And so, it's like they'll have a round with a whole bunch of candidates. Most of them don't get enough to stay in. They'll do another round. And they might have two, three, sometimes more. But that's essentially the different systems. But they always are based entirely on the popular vote, entirely. Just whoever
Right.
got the most votes wins. Like a voting system.
That's all. That's all we're
Yeah.
asking.
Okay. There is the um
That's the argument they're saying there's bigger problems.
yeah, oh, I got you. I got you. I got it. Okay. Okay. Beep. The next one here is this argument that like we've got bigger problems to solve. First of all, that is an argument that is used in bad faith in many places that I wish I had some examples right off the top of my head. But a lot of times it's the sort of whataboutism argument. It's the like, you're bringing up a valid argument, and rather than addressing that, I say, what about this? I'm like, we can walk and chew gum. We can
Right.
have, we can acknowledge this thing and have bigger problems. We can find joy in the world and also understand that there are serious problems in the world that need to be addressed and fixed. It's like I'm not going to withhold my ability to laugh for the rest of my life until all problems are fixed, right? That's a
Right.
nonsense way to go. I can do both of those things. And so anyway, the idea that the electoral college is too small of a problem to worry about excuse me, beep, means that the policies and actions of the president aren't very important. Like that's essentially what that would imply. President doesn't really matter. So why would we worry about trying to fix the system? If we had a prime minister in the United States, that would be true. But given that we have the most extreme candidates imaginable anymore, the
Mm-hmm.
idea that this isn't a pressing issue seems patently false. And as we talked about in the last episodes, most people tend to agree that is not accurate.
Right, exactly. Now, the argument that a candidate would win only by winning a few states without winning votes in the other states is kind of true, but also very misleading. So essentially, what they were saying before was that okay, larger cities would win the election, so like we need to balance it out by having a higher percentage of a voice essentially for smaller places, right? And
Smaller
that's kind
states
of what
specifically,
the
yeah.
smaller states specifically, right? So, but without the electoral college, the president wouldn't win states; they would win
Yeah.
votes. Period. They would win raw votes. The raw votes they were so concerned about,
Yeah.
they would win those raw votes. This means that they could win the majority of the votes, even if those votes happen to be concentrated in certain geographical regions. We'll expand on this when we address other arguments. But all this is saying is if somebody has more points, they win. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Like,
Yeah.
like the NBA finals works because the team that wins has the most points at the end of the games that they needed to win. They win games. They have the most wins. They have the most points in those games. It's points.
That's how I'm given to understand it. Yes, the most points wins.
Yeah, in most games, yes.
But yeah, the really key element of this argument is understanding that like states basically don't exist if we move to a popular vote. I mean, they exist as far as having like a government that's unique to that geographical region, but as
Sure.
as you said, the correct way of thinking about this is that candidates would no longer win states. Because there's no boundary. They would just be whoever got the most votes. So there aren't states with respect to how, and they're sort of saying
Right.
like, but they'd be all concentrated in where the most people are. I'm like, yeah, most people are there. Like,
Right. Which means when they campaign, they would campaign to people. They wouldn't campaign to states.
yes, exactly. Like, I gave the example in the first episode about like having an office party. We were choosing the type of ice cream. Let's imagine that we were like having, let's imagine we're all in high school or something and we're having a school assembly and we're all going to vote on, uh, whether
Graduation song. We're gonna vote on
graduation
our
song.
graduation song, and then
Great.
everybody votes for Vitamin C's graduation song when it should have been Freebird.
Well, hold on. We
That's
need
a
to lay
very
out the
particular
context a bit more.
experience for me. Sorry.
So first we get everybody in the gym, and then we basically they all most of the people happen to go over where like the AC unit is because it's really hot and they're trying to cool down a little bit. So they're over kind of by the AC unit, but there's definitely a few people sort of around the other places of the gym. And we say, stop, you can't move anymore. Now what we're gonna do is have everyone vote. But the people who are not under the AC unit, their votes count more because we don't want the people who are under the AC unit to have that much voting power because they're over there and not over on the other side of the gym. Like that's
Yes.
basically the
Yes.
argument that we're making here is
Yep.
like you happen to be over there. Therefore, your vote shouldn't count as much because we don't want that side of the gym to have so much voting power. I'm like,
Right.
I don't think that side of the gym has anything to do with it. Anyway, sorry, getting ahead of ourselves. We need to move on. Okay.
Yes.
As we mentioned, the two-party system thing. Sorry, I need to cool down by a
Goose
minute.
Fraba.
Good callback. Or reference. I guess we never made that joke, so we couldn't call back to it. But we talked about this
I wrote
two-party
Bad Boys
system.
too.
The argument being that like it helps preserve the two-party system. Well, the polls show most people don't like having a two-party system. Helping to preserve the two-party system alone is an argument to get rid of the Electoral College, even if none of the arguments were there. The
Right.
system fosters a tendency toward the most extreme candidates and wide, contentious political divides across the country. Many people just want more and different choices, and they have said this over and over again in polls. Even those of us who feel pretty tightly aligned with our own parties don't necessarily see the option of other parties as being a terrible thing if those people had the real opportunity to represent be represented in the government because those are people who are here who do want their voice to be heard. So
Right.
unlikely they would necessarily make it to the presidency, but we also only have two actual parties really being represented in Congress.
Right, absolutely. Now, the argument that presidential candidates wouldn't campaign to smaller states, it's demonstrably false. So the overwhelming majority of candidates' time is spent in battleground states. That is, states with a high electoral count that have a relatively even split. And Democratic and of those Democratic and Republican voters, right? So like you'll hear the term swing states a lot because
Right.
they can go one way or another because of that kind of equal split. So they actually spend more time in those places campaigning to help swing the vote in their favor.
Yeah,
The Electoral College means that candidates only need to focus on winning those largely populated states. They only need to go to the places with the most points. They don't need to go to Alaska or Maine or Vermont because there's not as many points to win there. But they need to go to places like Ohio and California and Florida and like different places that have a high concentration of these votes. So what ends up happening is the candidates need to focus on these largely populated states where the votes are not guaranteed. They will do little campaigning in other states, but states don't matter to a candidate when they must secure the popular votes. So if they had to secure the popular vote and votes mattered as a 1-to-1 ratio, one person to one vote, and when every person gets the vote, then the candidate is incentivized to spend time in the most populated areas, but also get votes wherever they can get them, which means smaller areas because every vote matters.
exactly. That is exactly, I think, another one of the most key points here. And yeah, actually, to contradict one thing you said is political candidates rarely campaign in California, which has like
Right.
the highest number of electoral votes. And the reason is they don't really need to. It's like Republican candidates, they're unlikely to get enough votes there to
Right.
get all of the electoral votes. Democrat candidates have it locked down. So they really spend it in the sort of 6 or maybe 8 states where it's not guaranteed. So they're going to be in, well, they historically have been in Florida. As you said, Ohio, Pennsylvania, recently Michigan. So there's like a, a handful of battleground states where they're going to spend a ton of money and a ton of time. But as you were pointing out, the point is when they aren't trying to get electors, they're trying to get every vote they can, which means that they need to spread their campaigning out more. And
Right.
so they, wherever they can get a vote, that vote will count for them. Because if they know that they can't squeak over the margin of 50%, there's really little incentive for them to campaign there at all. Versus
Right.
if they are going to get any votes there, they want to get as many as they possibly can. So they're going to campaign pretty much everywhere. Because it's like some states that
Right.
might have like 45%, they don't win the plurality of that state, but they still got 45% of the votes in that state. And they need those if they're going to secure victory. Right. So
Well,
that's
right.
that's why it matters.
Well, and to that point, like think about it like this. Like, so you're in a state that is maybe guaranteed. Like, let's go back to California, right? So you're a conservative candidate and you don't even bother campaigning in California because why would you? Why would you? Because you're not going to win that electoral vote. But the problem is that there are people who are your constituents there. There are people
Yeah.
who are going to vote for you. There are people who want to hear from you. There are people there that want to hear what policies you have that are going to impact them, and you don't even bother giving them the time of day. So,
Right.
like, the Electoral College doesn't just de incentivize campaigning into these states, it also makes it so that your voice for your candidate in a state where maybe you're not going to win the electoral vote, like your voice doesn't really matter that much to the candidate that is currently running because your state is not going to go to them. So they're not
Right.
going to bother for you. They're not campaigning for you. They're campaigning for the people who are on the fence in Florida or Ohio or Pennsylvania. And that
Yeah.
is kind of sad.
Yeah. It specifically disenfranchises voters of the non-populist party in states that are unlikely to ever vote for the other candidate. So, like those, just as you said, like how disenfranchising is it to be a Republican in California, where like, yeah, I'll go vote, but like, what good that'll do?
Right.
Because
They're not doing
California's,
anything for me anyway.
yeah, or like Democrats who live in like, let's say Idaho, all two of them. Like what? Why should I go vote? Like, oh, Idaho's never going to vote for the Democratic candidate. Like, that's not that'll never be my choice. And
Right.
so, like, I think it specifically disenfranchises voters because their voices don't matter in states where they're not battleground states.
And disenfranchises voters that want to vote. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing. Like there are people that already don't want to vote. There are people who are involved in politics that don't want to be involved in politics because they never get a chance to be heard because their candidates never bother to take time to visit them.
Exactly. All right. Now, there's more to say on this, and we need to cool off. And what
Yeah.
better way to do that than forcing everyone to listen to ads?
the the best calming method.
That's right. Actually, it makes me much angrier. All right.
And
So
another thing.
we've been talking about this whole argument about battleground states and the idea of them campaigning. And again, the logic of this argument doesn't actually make sense, really. So let's just say, even if it was true that small states wouldn't have candidates campaign there, which it isn't, that assumes a couple of things about those states. One, it assumes that they want candidates campaigning there. Probably some people do, but
Right.
there's definitely, I think, campaign fatigue in the United States because we have no real restrictions on when you can start campaigning, and except for essentially how much money they can raise. And so
Right.
we spend like 2 years not in campaign mode, and the rest of the time is like campaign mode. Maybe 2 years,
Right.
maybe it's a year and a half, maybe it's only a year. It's like we're always being campaigned to about candidates, and it sucks. So I
Yeah.
don't know that that assumption is necessarily true, although it probably is for some people. The other assumption is it assumes that the people in those states would rather their votes not count to then have incentive for the candidate to campaign there, assuming that was a legitimate argument in the first place. Let's take
Right.
Maine, for example. Maine generally, recently, has cast its electors toward the Democratic candidate. The Democratic candidate has won the popular vote in eight of the nine last elections at the time of this recording.
Right.
The argument here suggests that they would rather their votes not matter because the Electoral College will choose a candidate other than the one they elected. so that they could have the chance that the candidate will campaign in their state, which they're already not doing. Like
Right.
the logic of this is so massively flawed from start to end that it is a complete nonsense thing to say and be like, we should keep the electoral college because blah, 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 blah. I'm like, those aren't words.
No, I mean that's there are some people that heard that and understood it.
Yeah. I'm like, you said nothing, but it's almost worse than that because it's just backwards. All of it's wrong. There's literally not one part of that argument that holds water. So let's
Right.
move on from that part.
Yes, 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 yes. So the last idea that votes in geographical minorities wouldn't matter is egregiously incorrectly, and so it's so incorrect that as to be the opposite of true. Like it is, it could not be further from the truth. But it also is saying the quiet part out loud. If we eliminate the electoral college, then the candidate with the majority of votes wins. Period. Right? This means that every person's vote counts as one vote. And we've kind of said this multiple times. One person equals one vote. And that's a nice idea, right? The Electoral College preserves a system in which some people's votes count more than others. And that's exactly what happens. So instead of one to one correspondence, what you've got is in some states, a vote counts for less. And in other states, a vote counts for more, depending on how it's weighted. The Electoral College is simply a weighted system.
Yeah. It puts its thumb on the scale of elections to push it toward certain candidates.
Right,
And again, this is just not this is not what it's specifically not what people want. It is
right,
specifically not what people are choosing. It is
right,
asking people what they want and then doing the opposite. Like, why did you even ask?
right.
What was the point? So, to segue to this is a related point. So they say this like the most highly populated cities and states would decide the election. No, they fucking wouldn't. First of all, cities don't vote. States don't vote. Land does not have an election card. Land does not get to vote in things. One person, one vote, as we've said. That should be the rule. Cities don't vote for candidates. States don't vote for candidates. People vote for candidates. The idea that large cities would select the president implies that those people have more votes than people in smaller areas. Do they have more votes than people in smaller areas? No, they do not.
No,
They have
nope.
one vote. One person, one vote. That is what we're suggesting here. One person living in Chicago gets one vote. One person living in Ely, Nevada gets one vote. They each get a vote. The
Yeah,
argument that they are making is that people in rural areas should get more votes because that way they can have more power in elections than people who live in highly populated areas. They're arguing that if you happen to live just by, for whatever reason, circumstances brought you to an area with a lot of people, your vote shouldn't count as much. It should count less. If you happen to live, for whatever circumstance that brought you to a place that has fewer people, your vote should count for more. And that's just wrong. Like that's wrong. We're
right,
asking people to choose their elected leaders and then ignoring that choice.
right,
Again, it just so happens to be the case that like where you end up is where you end up. If I were to just move you somewhere else, would your opinion suddenly change about that candidate? Unlikely.
right,
There's really no reason to think that it would. So, and I think we'll make that point, but I just want to make sure we're really clear. This whole idea that like, well, we give too much power to the cities. I'm like, no, we would count all the people who vote who happen to be located there. Let's take
right,
California, for example, a very solidly Democratic state. It has voted for Democrats in the last several elections. There are millions of Republican voters there whose votes are not being counted
right,
because the electoral system sends all of their delegates to support the Democratic candidate. And we were talking about this earlier. Like, if we get the argument that states would choose electors assumes that somehow states retain an electoral system after we've gotten rid of it. we're saying that system is gone. Like this argument just doesn't make any sense because again, states would no longer be choosing presidents, just votes would be.
Right, right. So let's take that. Let's do a thought experiment for a second. Let's pretend that we reallocated people so that every single city in this country had the same exact number of people. Those people are not going to change their vote because they are now in a different area. Now, the size of the city doesn't matter, and the candidate with the most votes always wins every election. Would we be okay with that? Would you all be okay with that? There's a lot of people that would not be okay with that just because it's not what we've always done. But because this isn't about fair equal representation, it is about maintaining an unfair unequal representation based on land, not people.
Right. So they literally said in their argument that the person who wins the most votes shouldn't necessarily win the election. That's what they said. The candidate who
Yep,
wins the most votes should not win the election. What the fuck?
that's
Regardless
weird.
of whatever follows in their argument, this is an asinine statement. If their candidate was the one who kept winning the vast majority of votes, but losing because a system more heavily weighted the votes of their opponent, I strongly doubt that they would keep making an argument to keep the system. The only argument is they don't like how the outcomes would be shaped because they would lose the votes. And I
Right,
think what would happen ultimately if we got rid of this system is people would have to be less extreme. You would have to pick better candidates because your candidate won't win if you keep picking terrible candidates. Pick
right.
better candidates, then they'll win all the votes. So that's essentially what would be incentivized by eliminating the electoral college system is having better candidates who are not so extreme. What a crime.
I know. Isn't it wild to think that that's like something that is well within our grasp, but never happens because people are too up their own butts about their political party?
I mean, and just uh, the arguments here they don't make sense. They don't stand on their own. They're counterproductive across the board. The only argument like what they're the only thing they're actually saying really here is we know we're going to lose this election because we have terrible candidates and terrible policies. So we're going to change the system, or well, I mean, the system favors this already, but we are going to have a system whereby we can still win sometimes. I'm like, that's not the system anybody here wants. We are specifically
Right.
choosing not that, and it's pushing things to the extremes. So it is just a colossal, fantastic failure. I'll share more of my opinion about this if not that I haven't done so generously so far, but there is actually more to say after we sit through some more advertisements.
Oh, capitalism.
I'll just pick up this next part.
All right. Beep. So there are some other arguments to consider when we're talking about this, as if there's not hundreds and hundreds of arguments. I mean, the real argument should just be one person, one vote. That's what it should be.
That's
But
it.
there are to unpack this more. There's a thing called faithless electors, and these are people who don't vote according to the majority in their states. So you might have a situation where the majority of a state votes one way, and the elector votes the opposite, different way. And sometimes it's legal and sometimes it's not, depending on how it's codified in state law.
Yeah, so this is actually sort of an interesting thing to unpack. This is probably a good place for this. Is
Yeah.
some have raised the argument. So like some states, the Supreme Court in some states has upheld that if an elector did not vote for the candidate that won the majority of that state's votes, in some states they are like prosecuted, they are prevented from holding that position any longer, and they are not allowed to participate in related activities. And the Supreme Court upheld that, saying you basically did not do your job. Your job here was to vote in accordance with the popular vote of your state. You did not do that. You no longer get to hold this position.
Right.
Other states have gone the opposite direction, where they had faithless electors who chose someone other than who that candidate selected and cast their electoral vote toward a different candidate who did not win the popularity of that state. And the Supreme Court of that state said instead, you have the right to do whatever you want. This is not spelled out in the Constitution whether you have to vote with accordance to the state's popular vote. It was kind of implied, but it wasn't actually spelled out. So you get to sort of vote your conscience, if you will, and choose
Right.
whatever candidate you think you is in line with your values, which again then distills the millions of people's votes down into like 10 people. And one of
Right.
those people then counts for 10% of that state's power. That is a ludicrous, ridiculous amount of power for that person to have.
Right. Right. It's absurd.
Okay. There's another thing that we talked about in the first episode, that the very first instance in which the person who won the popular vote did not become president was actually because they had so many candidates who won such a large proportion of the vote. They had four. And Congress, in that situation, the vote goes to Congress to decide who wins, but they only decide on the top three. So the fourth place person threw all of their political power behind the second place person and got that person elected. And so what happened was they basically went to that second candidate and said, "Hey, you make me your Secretary of State, and I will throw all of my political might behind you becoming the president." So what happens is sending the vote to Congress can incentivize these sort of insider deals and corruption, because you have people sort of, again, they're undercutting the vote of the people, and sort of they're doing under the table back alley deals to just maintain power by like making promises to each other, some quid pro quos, as we've heard
Yeah.
said. And like that just is a recipe for corruption that we definitely are trying to avoid in general in a functioning government.
Right. And then there's also the argument that because most of the country's like GDP is concentrated in most densely populated areas and the more densely populated areas, we have this issue that ultimately they have less representation, even though there is more money and economy and all this stuff happening inside of these larger populations, right? There's more stuff happening in these larger epicenters of the cities, and they arguably get less representation because of the way the Electoral College is set up.
Yeah, it's almost like the bulk of our economy is handled by these places where the most people happen to be, and then we're giving them the least amount of voting power. Like if we were going to inequitably distribute voting power, wouldn't we be distributing it toward the places that make our economy thrive the most?
Right.
And that's sort of, and so I mean I would say no, let's not unequally distribute power at all. But that would be going literally the opposite way it's currently going. And so they're sort of making the argument that it's so wrong it's backwards if it was going to be any way, if the scales are going to be tipped any one way.
Yeah, and I think when you think about it, and this is something that like, and we'll talk about this in a second too. But I think when you hear people say, well, why would I vote? Your votes don't matter. Like there is a system in place that has effectively made people feel like that. Like this
Yeah.
system, the way that it is designed and the way the Electoral College works is effectively made people feel like their votes don't matter because ultimately, if I vote one way in a state that gives all the electoral votes another way, then sure, my vote didn't really matter in that
Yeah.
elector, at least for the president, right? And we could talk all day about local elections and how important they are too, but like arguably, it makes sense that people have a certain feeling about this.
Yeah. And I think I've never really liked that argument very much, and I'll just say a quick piece on that, which is like you are correct that when you have lost, your voice did not really count for anything because none of your voting power went to supporting the candidate you wanted to support. And I understand that
Right.
sentiment. I've also heard like, well, my vote's not going to be the one that tips the scales. I'm like, it should
Mm,
never be that way. That's a dictatorship or like a monarchy that we're talking
right.
about. One person should not have that kind of power. The point is you participate in having your voice heard and be represented. And also going back to just the main argument of like your voice didn't matter is like that person still did win because they had enough votes that the electoral votes that of that state went to the candidate. So
Right.
they did have to have all those people voting for them. It wasn't any one person in there that did it. It was all the people together. And so when you lose, that's a bummer, and it definitely is not fair that your voice doesn't count toward supporting the candidate you chose. But like, if enough people had supported the candidate, your voice would have been a part of that. And
Right.
so the defeatist attitude of like, well, it's not going to matter. I'm like, I do understand in a way, but also consider like that's essentially how candidates lose. Also,
Right, exactly.
okay, so we've been um, extolling the virtues of this system. There is the question that we sort of raised is what can we do about this? Hold on, going back. Everything before I said we've been extolling the virtues we're going to cut. Boop. I did have a question. We were kind of wondering, like, how are electors even selected? You get these like faithless electors and that sort of thing. Um, Apparently there's only a couple rules that were sort of spelled out, and then there was different ways that it had been handled. Essentially, the only thing that's specified in the Constitution states that you just can't be a member of Congress or hold federal office. That's pretty much it. Anyone else
Yeah.
could potentially be an elector. But they said basically, states, you figure out how you want to choose your electors. Now, until about the mid 1800s or so, okay, beep, until about the mid 1800s or so, the legislators would just appoint electors. They just say you're going to be an elector. That was it was an appointed position. Most commonly anymore, the state party convention chooses electors, and they have like nominated a slate of electors that they'll vote on at the convention, and then those electors become the electors for the state. In some states, electors are chosen by a vote of the state's party central committee, but it seems like
Right.
most states have this. These each political party state convention will select their electors. And it seems like a lot of time these are people who serve in other government roles in the state. So again, they can't have federal office, they can't be in Congress, but it seems like it's probably a lot of people who have other government roles who end up being the electors for that state.
Right. So where do we
Uh,
go from here? I mean, this it's a mess. So what do we do?
Sorry, it looks something up really quick.
You're okay.
Okay. Um, okay. Yeah. So a lot of people are dissatisfied with the electoral system, as we mentioned in the first episode. We talked about that when polled, most people say that they think we should get rid of the system. Again, right now, our voices are not super well represented in government, so it seems unlikely that that change would happen. But excuse me, but most people are in favor of this. So there is this path forward. Someone put forth this idea. I saw his name, but I didn't write it down and I forgot what it was. But he was like a big political person. They put together this idea to essentially undercut the Electoral College. It's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, sometimes abbreviated as NPV, as National Popular Vote, or NPVIC for the Interstate Compact part. And this is an agreement between states to send their electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote, not necessarily the candidate that their state selected. Essentially meaning that, like, let's just say I'm in Nevada. Let's just say that Nevada happens to vote for, realistically, let's say Nevada happens to vote for Donald Trump with the majority of people here, but the popular vote went to Kamala Harris. The state would then
Right.
send all of their electoral votes to Kamala Harris because she won the popular vote, and not to Donald Trump because he did not win the popular vote, even though the majority of the state did. Um,
Right.
and so essentially that would undercut entirely the idea of the Electoral College, because the candidate who won the popular vote would also just get all of the electoral votes in this agreement. And which I'm anyway, so far 17 states representing 209 beep 17 states representing 209 electoral votes, which is 39% of the Electoral College, have signed on to this agreement. Another 5 states are pending approval, representing 50 more electoral votes for a total of 259. To win an election, a candidate must have 270 electoral votes. So they are only 11 away.
Right.
However, the system will only go into effect if they can reach the majority needed, that 270 votes, to secure an election. So they are just 11 electoral votes shy, assuming that the pending states complete their agreement process, of going to a system wherein 270, at least 270 electoral votes would be guaranteed to go to the candidate who won the popular vote. It would literally get rid of the electoral system. I mean, it would also disenfranchise all the voters in that state who voted for the candidate who didn't get elected. And hence, it's still not better than a popular vote, but it would completely undercut the original intention of the Electoral College, which was to give more power to fewer people.
So it would be the thing that would demonstrate that the Electoral College can be broken. And
Yes.
that's the thing I think that needs to be seen is like it's that whole idea of like in 300 where it's like he didn't have to win, he just had to make God bleed, right? And
Yeah.
so like and that's really what has to happen. It's like we have relied so heavily on this system for so long that if you show that it can be broken by simply making an agreement or a compact, like if you can do that, then ultimately the system had not enough power to sustain anyway. So it was time to undo the system.
Well, obviously, this was proposed because they think the system is broken as it is. Like it's clearly not
Right.
representing the will of the voters. But I know we have people who listen to us who are not Democrats. So let's spin this as a hypothetical in your favor. Let's say you're planning on supporting Donald Trump in the upcoming election. Let's say that states, including California and New York, were on board with this plan to send their electors toward the popular candidate. Let's say that Donald Trump wins the popular vote but loses the Electoral College. In this new system, even California, having voted completely for the Democratic candidate, would send all of their electoral votes for Donald Trump because he won the popular vote, assuming they were part of this group of states who had agreed
Right.
to this. So in that case, it would guarantee that having won the popular vote secured him the candidacy. You can see why you'd look at that because like imagine how frustrated you would be if he won the popular vote and then lost the electoral college. That's how the other half has felt the last several elections,
Right.
that where that
Right.
has actually been the case. So again, it's really about securing fairness in the elections by ensuring that the candidate who is chosen by the people becomes the leader.
Right. Well, and I think also too, I could see people going like, I don't know about that. But at the end of the day, when you think about the 2016 election and the way the votes went in California, when you really think about it, it's the same kind of thing. Like you didn't win, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a blue state that went into red territory, like it went into a red presidency, a blue state that went into a red presidency, essentially, right? And so you didn't win with the way the system works as it is. So why not change it up anyway to see what happens? Like I don't know why we wouldn't want to try to shake it up a little bit, spice it up.
Yeah, I mean the whole point here is that everyone's vote should count. Everyone's vote should count. Everyone's vote should
Yeah,
count exactly the same as everyone else's vote. Because just as you said, like when you're in a state that heavily favors one party over the other consistently, and you're not in that majority, then like how disenfranchising for you to literally never have your vote counted toward the candidate that you support. If you throw your vote behind a candidate who doesn't win, like if we move to a popular vote, let's say, at least your vote was counted for that person's support, right?
Right.
And if
At the
you vote
minimum.
it at the minimum, if you throw your vote behind the candidate who did win, your vote was part of what helped that happen. And right now, if you throw your vote behind the candidate who wins the popular vote but loses the election, that is so enormously frustrating and so counterproductive and so backward. It is just wrong. Every part of it is wrong. It is like homeowners associations. We should throw it in the ditch, set it on fire, and write in history books what a terrible, terrible mistake it was
Yeah.
that we ever had this in the first place. I was so
Yes.
I, I was going to share my opinion. I was when I first started doing like the research to put together the notes for this discussion. I was like already in favor of the idea of removing or maybe just restructuring the Electoral College before I sort of got into this. I remember thinking like this feels like this is not a very good system. But I also heard arguments for people saying this, like we do need to preserve this system. It has an important function. And so I went into
Right.
this with an open mind, thinking, I want to know what those arguments for. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my opinion about this has been all askew. But then I learned about the system. And I went from being moderately in favor of eliminating it to being a vehement advocate for the immediate abolition of the Electoral College. Immediate.
Yeah.
Let's not wait.
Yeah.
Do it tomorrow. Do it yesterday. It is
Yeah.
a
Ratify that shit.
garbage system that is terrible for our country. It is terrible for democracy. It sets a terrible precedent and it fucking sucks.
It doesn't
Burn it.
work.
Throw it away. It does not work.
So, yeah, I think it's a good take home point.
You could call it
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I'm gonna say I'm not. It's funny is I'm in the same boat. Like, I never really understood why it was a thing, and it never made sense to me logically. And then going into this, you're like, oh yeah, no, this is like just bad for
Yeah.
everybody involved.
Yeah. It's like you might find it a little confusing and a little weird. And then you learn about it and you're like, wow, this is amazingly stupid. This
It's
is not a good
intentionally
idea.
confusing.
Yeah, this was like a deliberately bad, belligerently bad idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think that's what we have to say about the Electoral College.
We nailed it.
What we nailed it. Why do people do it? Because they were very cynical and had bad ideas and were not thinking clearly, and then they wrote that into a policy that almost couldn't be changed, even though people have tried over 700 times to change it. And so we've had a really tough go of it. We have had a system
Yeah.
that is, I mean, it had mostly not mattered that it was a bad system for a long time. And now we're at the point where it is so cracked and frayed, it is basically just a crumbly turd that is trying to destroy our country. So
Yep.
just flush that turd. Let's start over with a clean toilet.
Yeah, that sounds. I think you nailed. That's the take home point.
All right. Well, we can wrap it up there. Is there anything you'd like to add? Because I didn't really give you a chance to share much about your thoughts on this before we
No,
transition to some recommendations.
no, I think we nailed it. I think that's exactly where I would have landed on that.
Okay, lovely. Well, if you are not familiar with our format here, we like to recommend some fun things that are just unrelated to our topic. They're just things we're recommending. But before I do that, I must review the credits. Thank you so much for joining us and for listening. If you would like to support our show, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, you can join us on Patreon. There you get ad-free episodes, early episodes, bonus content, all that sort of good thing, and you get to help support what we do, which we very much appreciate. You can also support us non-financially by leaving us a rating and a review, subscribing, telling a friend, liking, sharing, do all that sort of thing. And you can also pick up some merch if you want to just have some cool podcast merch to sport around, which is always very good.
Hmm.
And all of that's very lovely. Also, if you join us on Patreon, something else important happens, which is that I am going to read your name to thank you for throwing your support behind us. And that includes
Gotta find your tabs.
Gotta find my tabs. Mike M, Megan, Mike T, Justin, Kim, Joshua, Brad, Stephanie, Olivia, Brian, Ashley, Kiara, and Michelle. Thank you all. You are just so wonderful, and I just really, really appreciate who you have been for us for so long.
Absolutely. Y'all are just absolutely, truly the best.
Of course, thank you to my team of people without whom I would have a very difficult time making a podcast. Writing and fact checking with from Shane and myself. Our social media coordinator is Emma Wilson, and the audio that sounds like two people having a cohesive conversation brought to you courtesy of Justin, who I unfortunately made work much harder on this episode than he should have to, but I do appreciate his efforts. So thank you, Justin,
Yes.
for
Yes.
being so patient with me.
You're the best.
All right, now I think that's all I have. Is there anything that I am forgetting before we transition to our recommendations?
Not today, no.
Okay, let's recommend some things.
Yay.
As I have been on my high ranty horse lately, I'll let you start with the recommendations.
So I'm going to recommend a book. I recently finished a book called Naked by David Sedaris.
Okay.
So, have you ever read David Sedaris?
I don't think so, no.
I feel like you would really
I have been
appreciate.
naked though.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Many of us have. Can't say all of us. Because there's never there's never a certainty. So okay, so this David Sedaris is a short story kind of like I want to say autobiographical writer. A lot of his books are a collection of short stories about his family, about kind of his experiences, and some of them are just very outlandish. He's got a very strange sense of humor. So, like in Calypso, which is like one of his later books, he wrote the story about how he had gotten a fatty tumor removed, but he didn't want to go to an American hospital, so he crossed the border and got it cut out in like the garage in
Uh,
somebody in Mexico,
Whoa.
and then had the tumor mailed to himself, put it in the freezer so he could feed it to a snapping turtle in North Carolina. Just like
Sure.
just
As one does.
bizarre, yeah, as one does. So Naked is one of his earlier story, like collection of short stories, and it's really kind of like talks about his early life and how he would hitchhike and some of the trouble he got into, and just some of the characters he meets along the way. Really fascinating to kind of you kind of go, this isn't real. There's no way this happened. And then for the most part, yeah, I mean, there might be some like language embellishments here and there, but for the most part, his experiences are all real. And you
Wow.
just kind of go, this sounds like it's all made up and so on such a level that like it's stranger than fiction, really.
Huh.
Um he's written a bunch of things. His sister is Amy Sedaris, who was the main
Oh,
character on Strangers with Candy.
yeah.
So that's and like she's a comedian, she's a popular comedian.
I thought that
So
name
so
sounded
it's
familiar.
yeah, so David Sedaris is her sibling, and he's written so much stuff, and Naked is probably one of his best. So I definitely
Huh.
recommend it as a fun read. But I
All
say
right.
fun. There are some harrowing stories in it, but it is an interesting read, I'll say.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Live Fast, Write a Book. This is
Uh-huh.
Naked by David Sedaris. All right. I've
Yes.
been on a huge movie watching streak lately. I really stepped up my movie watching game, which makes me just feel all the happy joys. And
Sure.
one I had the pleasure of watching that came out, I believe, a year ago or so, is a new standalone installment of the genre of monster movies known as Godzilla. And this is Godzilla Minus One.
Man.
And man, what a fantastic movie. It is maybe, I mean, I have not seen all of the Godzilla movies, but it is definitely the best one I have ever seen. It is really, really spectacularly done. And so the director, as I understand it, the director like originally worked as a visual effects artist. So he really knew how to direct and set up a movie where you could capitalize on visual effects the best. And this movie only cost them, if I remember correctly, like $15 million to make. And
Yeah.
while that sounds like an absurd amount of money to you or I, who like will never see $15 million collectively in our entire lifetime, that's like a drop in the bucket relative to how much other Godzilla movies cost, or any movies for that matter, that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars range, or even more than
for
that.
for perspective, Avengers Endgame cost $356 million to make.
Great. That is
Yep.
that is more than 10 times more what Godzilla cost to make.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you can, I saw this on Netflix. I'm sure it won't be up there forever, but that's at least where it was streaming at the time that we're recording this. So if you're interested in monster movies, this one, as I said, it's probably the best Godzilla movie I have ever seen, and I have seen quite a few, although not many of the super old ones, which I'm sure are also great in their own way. But all right, I think that is all that I have. Godzilla minus one, the movie, and Naked, the book by David Sedaris. And if you would like to tell us about your thoughts about the Electoral College or Godzilla movies or books called Naked, you should certainly reach out to us. You can email us directly at info@wwd.wwdpodcast.com. You can reach us on the social media platforms. And if you'd like to leave us some constructive criticism, you can also reach out to us directly, and we will happily hear that. If you have some nonsense things to say, then you can certainly say them, and we'll just ignore you. But we do appreciate we appreciate heaping piles of praise, and we also appreciate constructive criticism because we really value learning on this show. That's pretty much why we
That's
do it,
true.
so we can learn stuff. That's why we do what we do.
That's exactly why we do what we do.
So anyway, I think that is all that I have to say. Thank you for listening. Is there anything that you would like to add or anything that I forgot before we wrap up here?
Nothing on my end.
Okay, thank you. This is Abraham.
And it's a shame.
We're out.
Yeah.
All right. If we can get this uploaded right now, Justin can start working on it because I know he's got some stuff going on this weekend.
Yep. I'm gonna send it right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Right.
We did the thing.
We did it. Yay.
All right. So later in the afternoon on Sunday, and it sounds like you just want to try and get a short one out of the way.
Yeah, I'm gonna get everything. I'll let you know as soon as I'm like on the way home. So
Okay.
and that way we can plan. We're probably gonna try, like I said, we're gonna check out of the hotel early. Because it's a 2.5 hour drive, I think, from where we're going. So I will let you know, and then we will get it on the schedule for the afternoon, evening.
So will you not be able to record on the following Sunday because you'll be in Hawaii?
Yes. So if we're able to do an episode and a nostalgia, I'm thinking that might
Okay.
be good. We can kind of knock out 2 episodes for that, and then we can plan
Okay.
accordingly, or we can do whatever. I mean, like I won't be able to record. I mean, I would assume I'll be able to record 2 episodes on Sunday, but I just don't know how things are gonna feel or be here.
Okay.
So
All right.
we will figure that out.
Okay. Yeah, if we could have, because I know I got a bunch of travel. I'm going to be gone for 2 Sundays, which I guess I could bring my recording stuff. Um, but one, I might be traveling one of them. So if we had a couple of Sundays coming up where we could knock out two at a time, that would allow us to have some padding, some cushion in there.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's plan that because I know that like I'll be out. I think I'll be out actually. I think I fly out this Sunday. I think I fly out this Sunday and then I get back like the next Sunday. So like I think there's those are 2 Sundays where I will for sure be out.
Oh, okay.
I'll
Wow.
get you
All
those
right.
dates though. I
Okay.
know. It's gonna be a little bit hectic. So I'll get you those dates and we'll figure some stuff out.
We're gonna have to do some. We're gonna have to do some non-Sunday recordings, I think, to stay on top of things.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay. I will let Justin know mine is up now. So,
Okay. Yep, mine will be up in just a second. So
okay.
yeah, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out.
All right. We should say goodbye to our patrons.
Bye,
Bye,
patrons. We love
patrons.
you.